Welcome to the Escape and Empower podcast. Escape from the corporate rat race to empowered franchise ownership. Are you ready to take control of your destiny, follow your dreams, and live life on your own terms? Join our hosts, Dave and Pete, for insights on how to break free from the corporate grind, ditch the 9-to-5, and step into empowered franchise ownership.
Welcome to the Escape and Empower podcast. My name is Dave Greenberg from the Empower Franchisee, and I'm here with my co-host, Pete Gilfillan.
Good morning, Dave.
What is going on in your world, Pete? Anything exciting?
I am pumped up as usual, right? So, I'm a huge fan of Darren Hardy, right? And everybody should, if they haven't already, subscribe to Darren Daily. It's a free message from him every day. It's about 6 minutes. It's about becoming a better person, better business person. Huge, right? And so he was talking today about, believe it or not, getting past procrastinating, right?
Right.
Procrastinating to do something. And what he said is, listen, people procrastinate and it's a bunch of baloney, right? He goes, you can handle procrastination because bottom line is procrastination, all it is fear.
Right.
Holy cow, you're absolutely right? You start, I don't want to do that, all kind of stuff. And it's about fear. It's fear of failure or failure of not being successful and stuff like that. And he said something that made a lot of sense to me. He says, listen, sometimes you just got to step in it to get past procrastination, get past the fear. You got to step into whatever you're fearful of. And whether it's making a decision to invest in a franchise, or in my case, when I was getting married, I was so fearful of getting married. I finally just had to say, listen, I got to do this. And I stepped up, right? And I thought that was pretty cool because a lot of people, they don't realize when they're procrastinating, it really is fear. And the solution for fear is stepping into it and just digging in and getting past it.
Well, you did the right thing because Shannon's a rock star, Pete. I'm glad you got past that fear and asked her to marry you. And I don't know, how many years has it been? 30 something?
Yeah, 30 years, something like that. Yeah.
Nice. So, some of the fears that I talk about a lot is fear of transition because, transition is a subject kind of what we're, thinking about today. And how do you master kind of and take control of your fear of professional transition and kind of go at it with confidence? Because these transitions, and we've all been through them. If you haven't been through them, you're lying to yourself or whoever you're talking to. Transitions are by choice or by circumstance. And most people that I work with are a professional crossroad, and it's a transition. So let's talk about it because like what Darren told you today, don't procrastinate, face the fear because it's liberating, it's empowering, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. I think you have to step into it and move forward. And both of us transitioned out of a great company, Ford, right? Not necessarily I wasn't necessarily ready for it, and so I think as we go forward and we help others, it's about being ready. So I think the answer to the question we were going to ask today is, can I be ready for transition? Because transition is coming. We're in a world now with change, and whether you like it or not, change is coming your way. And it might be next week, it may be 3 years from now, but we're in a world where change is coming your way. And so we might as well just step into it and figure it out. So let's talk a little bit about transition and how this all works.
So, a couple things is, let's be honest. It can be totally intimidating. And when you think about avoiding the paralysis that you just talked about, the other half of it, and I have rose-colored glasses many times, but I'm an optimist. It can be a new path forward. And I always say to our candidates, and I think you shared this with me when I first started this journey of being a consultant and helping other people realize their dream. This process, one, you got to trust the process that we're going to take you through. But two, the process is going to bring you energy. And we're going to talk about where that energy comes from. And when you get that energy going, I'm not some weird dude believing in the universe, but I do. And that universe will reward your energy and you being positive and bring things your way. And the first step I've always talked to my candidates about is educate yourself. Knowledge, we always say, is power, right? And knowledge is a great transition tool. So when I faced my own, I did devour books. I forget the transition books that I read, but absolutely, I was either given them by someone, or I went out and bought them. So think about reducing the uncertainty that you have in your mind, opening up your mind to new possibilities by educating yourself. One of the things you can educate yourself is about franchising interest. Maybe you take a deep dive into other W-2 jobs. Maybe you think about opportunities to give back in the the nonprofit world. But think about those different things. And I know both, Pete, you wrote a wonderful book, Hire Yourself. I have a learning center on my website filled with blogs and podcasts and recommended resources, but feel free to read Pete's book. He's a best-selling author, but use these resources or resources that you can find to springboard your own research and education.
I think when you get pushed into transition, first you got to get past the, I would call it anger, right? Or the disbelief, like I can't believe this just happened, right? And at the end of the day, it happened. And it's hard. It's hard because, you know, a lot of times our ego, all that kind of stuff. So you're angry, and then it's also scary because I've got that mortgage, I've got those kids in college, you know, I've got all these expenses, and you got to just kind of take a step back and say, listen, everything happens for a reason. The bottom line is that it doesn't matter why this happened, I got to figure it out. And to your point, it is about educating yourself, starting to educate yourself and start exploring your different options, because you have many different options. And if you're coming from a senior level executive position, you have great options, because you and I, we got great business skills and leadership skills from working at Ford, right? It was a phenomenal training center. And so they set us up for this transition. Now, we didn't necessarily like the idea of the transition, but at the end of the day, we got past the anger, we got past the fear, and we put our head down and we started educating ourselves and exploring our options.
And, you know, speaking about mentors and leadership at Ford, you and I had a great experience with a bigger than life leader named Darren. And one of his favorite things, when he said it to me a couple of times, Greenberg, you do know that hope isn't a strategy. And we were talking numbers, obviously. But you know something? I love Darren, and he taught us all a lot of things, and he certainly treated us and all the dealers really, really well.
Great, man. I'll just throw it out there. And I just used that quote with somebody the other day, you know, hope isn't an effective strategy. So I smile when you say that about Darren.
But cultivating hope isn't bad, especially when you take a cultivation of hope and replace it with entitlement. Because transitions, especially involuntary ones, can stir up, like you said, really tough emotions, anxiety, self-doubt, sometimes even despair. And it's all normal, right? There's these big W's, curves, all these curves that the professional therapist will take you through. But my point in my experience is stay hopeful, because even in hard times, it can give you strength to move forward. And when you think about how to foster positivity, there are a lot of things you can do. One thing we all talk about, practice your daily gratitude. Acknowledge the good things, big or small. When I have trouble sleeping, I remind myself of all the good things I did to help people. Puts me back to sleep. Repeat affirmations. Each step brings me closer to new opportunities. Prioritize self-care. This is so important. And honestly, it's one that I always put at the bottom. So I'm not practicing what I preach all the time, but exercise, eat well, and rest. Reflect on your skills, as you just said, Pete. When you built a great skill set, you have great accomplishments. So regain your confidence and seek the professional support you need. Don't be afraid of therapy. It can be invaluable during life changes.
There's no question about it, right? You have to take an inventory. You have to get your head in the right place, because if you have a positive attitude, to your point, positive things happen. And I'm a 100% believer in the gratitude mindset leads to success. And I've given all my kids gratitude journals and gratitude affirmations. So it is about being grateful, and it is getting yourself ready for the journey of the transition. You know, the book, Who Moved My Cheese, right? Being ready, getting those sneakers on, getting ready, because the cheese station moved and you got to go find the next cheese station. It doesn't matter from that standpoint. So physically, you got to get in shape. Mentally, get that support from that standpoint. Professionally, get a mentor, get a career transition professional to kind of help you. And then start looking at all your different doors, because I think what happens is, you know, to the point of being entitled, hey, listen, I was a senior level executive at Ford. I deserve another executive position. Well, you don't necessarily deserve another executive position. You have to go get that and work hard to get that next executive position. There is no guarantees in life. And so it is about having the right attitude, being ready for the journey of transition.
Yeah. And sometimes it requires humility, certainly requires action, but don't forget all those things. And I often say, okay, what have you filled out in your life? And I get a blank stare. Okay, think really hard. What have you not done so well? I sometimes get a blank stare. All right, what's the mess up that you really remember? And then we talk about once or twice that they mess some things up. Successful executives do successful things, because they're resilient. So don't lose that resilience. And, so I think those are really important things.
Yeah,
what else, Peter?
Well, I think it's about making mistakes, right? So, the deal is you're going to make mistakes. If you're trying to build something, grow, get to the next level, find your next opportunity, you're going to make mistakes. And the deal is that fail, right? So go out and figure out and try interviewing for another executive positions. Take a look at, hey, am I going to start a consulting business? What does that look like? I want to look at franchising. Go fail fast as you look for your next opportunity.
So the other thing I think about when talking about transitions is set realistic expectations. We talk about our process taking 4, maybe 6 weeks. You get into 8 weeks, you're kicking tires, things are not going right. But you can make a successful, educated decision with all your due diligence in a time frame. So set realistic expectations. We all know things go over budget, and we all know things take longer than expect, okay? So build that in. You can't plan a dumpster fire. You can't say it's going to take me 3 years. You're going to jump off a bridge doing all that stuff. But, set timelines, set expectations. How long would it take for you to build a profitable business? It could take years, not months. Finance, plan for startup costs. We just talked about this in another podcast, really about total investment and liquidity required. But don't forget, you need living expenses. So plan that and think about, break down that budget that you've been working toward, and responsibilities, think about what kind of support you're going to get. You're not alone when you're doing these things. So stay patient. And remember, early results don't define long-term success.
Well, I think it's very simple because people say, I make a $300,000 a year. I want to replace that income in the first year. I go, well, it doesn't work that way. It takes time to build a business. And so you're going to have to look at it. Now, if you're planning to go into business, you need a business plan. You need a pro forma. And I like pro formas because it makes you think about your future growth, planning for the future, the business plan. And I heard this quote from a general. This reporter was interviewing this general, and the reporter goes, well, how did the battle plan go? And he goes, well, the battle plan, the minute the battle started, was worthless. But the putting together the battle plan was priceless, right? So bottom line is we put together a plan, and the plan is never going to go the way we want it, but we put together a plan, understanding what our growth is, what our expenses are, and then planning accordingly. And as we talked about in prior podcasts, we want to make sure that we plan the right amount of capital. That's the big thing, because capital is the lifeblood of a business. So we want to make sure that we have the capital, and that's operating capital for the business, but it is also capital to cover your expenses if you're starting a business, right? If you're not doing it where you have a corporate income, if you're just, I've left the corporate world. Like when I left the corporate world and invested in Junk King, that was going to be my primary income. I didn't have anything else. And so I created a reserve, a bucket of money to cover our expenses, cover our mortgage, cover the food and all that kind of stuff for our kids. And as the business built, I took less out of that bucket, but I always knew I had enough money so that we wouldn't be homeless and my kids would eat. And that made Shannon very happy.
Yeah, I love that, Pete. We all learn a lot from different mentors, and certainly my father and my grandfather were bigger than life mentors to me. And my father taught me a lot of things, and so did my grandfather. But my dad always said, success is when preparedness meets opportunity. I was like, he says, just have a plan, because if you don't have a plan, you're floundering. And that's basically what you just talked about, a plan to succeed. And I really appreciate that, Pete, because it really hits home. So, when we think about transitions, we've all faced them. We've all been through the ups and downs. So we can talk to you. Pete and I can both talk to you about working through that transition, and whether you need to focus on educating yourself, whether you need to focus on cultivating hope, whether you want to set realistic expectations and have that discussion with us, or even if you want to figure out what a plan might be around the elements of what you need to put together. We're here to help. We've been through it. We've walked in those shoes, and we'd love to talk to you. Pete, thanks for joining us with this really important discussion, which I think is really relevant in today's world.
Yeah, no, I think it's right. You got to be ready for transition because it is coming your way. Maybe what I thought we'd do is maybe in a future podcast, talk a little bit about why transitions happen.
And the really cool stuff that comes out of it.
Excellent. All right, Dave, thank you so much.
Thanks, Pete.
Thanks for tuning in to the Escape and Empower podcast. We hope today's discussion has inspired you to consider franchise ownership as a path to leading life on your own terms. Start your journey towards financial financial freedom and flexibility. Connect with Dave at empoweredfranchisee.com or Pete at hireyourself.com. Until next time.